Hey everybody, I don't expect anybody to be up or on it today, but I am up and going to log in here, see what's going on. Heaven forbid anybody is awake. We can have some fun, maybe do a little talky talk. My name is Jack Devine, and welcome back to another episode of Office Hours here on Jacksnax. And today we're going to talk about Ophelia by the band, or at least start out talking about Ophelia by the band, and see how the conversation, comes and goes. Hey, it's Martin. It's nice to see you, sir. Here we go. This way I can monitor hellos and goodbyes from friends. And so we're going to talk about Ophelia by the band. And Ophelia is one of these tunes that lives within the rock guitar and jam band universe that folks love to hear. Has a really wonderful set of changes and kind of has an old-timey sound to it because it has this consistently hey, sorry to hear about your illness. So so it has this kind of old-timey sound based on its changes, which has a bunch of basically descending dominant seventh chords. And I've done some lessons on how to play through these kinds of changes in the past. There was one called descending dominant sevenths or something like that, where basically we're walking through some arpeggiated shapes like this: E7, A7, D7, like that. So E7, A7, D7, G. It's kind of ragtime sounds. Definitely happen to, use that kind of technology a lot, or technique rather, a lot when I was playing bluegrass and country and Americana music and stuff like that. Very handy. So the next thing to do, obviously after you learn how to do the rhythmic shapes, these little chord stabs, is to learn how to use them in, if we were arpeggiating. Okay, kind of coming up and down, using that. Now there's that little bit of that kind of energy going on in Ophelia here, and then they're commingling that harmonic device. There's that's like 1-6-2-5 turnaround that gets used in the song. That's done rather than a minor 6 and a minor 2. Right, we end up with a dominant 2 and a dominant 6. So we have to kind of track the thirds that are happening in there. So if any and all of that is kind of a puzzle to you as far as what the hell that gobbledygook means, hang tight and I'll explain it in a minute. But it is the most challenging thing for a lot of guitar players to handle. I'm not sure why that buzz is happening. I think my phone is not allowed to be that close to my interface. Let's see about that. Seems to have disappeared now. All right, so the idea here is that we're commingling two devices. One is this 1-6-2-5 thing, where we're out of the key of, we're using the A to D to G. All right, so Ophelia's progression starts out with the second device, which is this 1 to the 3 dominant. All right, so this is out of key. This is not where we want to generally. This is not an E7 chord. We don't usually have the song's out of the key of C, so we don't normally see E7 in there. So okay, so that's the third note of our major scale. But rather than it being the typical minor 7 shape, we're turning it into this. And that change, is, All of Me, Georgia on My Mind, Ophelia, Deal, lots of tunes utilize this kind of sound, okay? And the idea is that we've got this. That's a major pentatonic sound. All right, we're going to end up taking that and being able to alter it a little bit over top of that E sound. And depending on how much of that kind of snake charmery stuff you want to throw in there, and depending on the tune that you're playing, you may want to utilize that heavily or lay off of it. I tend to lay off of it in Ophelia. I think of Ophelia as being a little bit more bluesy, so I'll tend to, over the E7 chord, do things like, and then come up into the A7. Okay, so this is where there's that descending dominant seventh section. So if we have C, E7, and now E is acting as the 5 of A, and then A is acting as the 5 of D, and then D goes to F during the verse, and then up to G, G7, and then back to C for that 1, 6, 2, 5. 1, 6, 2, 5. Okay. And last but not least, the third idea that we can bring out is over top of that 5 chord, utilizing the raised fifth, okay? And that's this sound. See how it creates all that tension? Okay, so that's a G7 with this E flat in there. Headed back to the third of our C. Jack, it's Jay from Mason Jar. Hey, when we played with Doug. Hey, that's cool. Yeah, I remember you, dude. Younger guy. Sounds cool. Nice to see you again. So if we're doing that, boom, boom, da, da. Okay, these little rhythmic guitar stabs are obviously super helpful for understanding the next stage of developing over a song like this with these pretty complicated changes. They're not just your standard stuff. Once you go through you start to be able to spell out the chords with rhythmic shapes, then you start to break them apart, hopefully, and articulate them individual notes, and that's an arpeggio. And then what we want to start doing is commingling little bits of licks in with those shapes. So if we start over top of the G chord into our 1, right? That's over the top of the C chord. Now over the E chord, let's use a common tone, E again. But bring in the major third. That's the distinguishing note right there, that G sharp, okay? That third of the E7 chord is what's kind of breaking the key. So what we end up with here is this kind of energy. And if we're really crafty, we realize that the next chord is A7. So follow. was that augmented sound. G. Okay, and those are all of the devices that are going on inside of the Ophelia progression. And I know that that's kind of a dense 10 minutes to start out with. So if we look at, like, right? Right? Just a dynamite progression to work on, okay? So now that I've kind of explained what's happening and then played a little bit of that, I'm hoping that anybody who's out there might have a question and I could field it live for them, all right? So let's see what it says. So yeah, Ophelia kind of has that deal. Yeah, it does. It does. Absolutely. Rock and roll crocodile. So, oh yeah, I see. That's you there, Jay. So that's kind of the idea of this lesson, is to talk through some of the more compelling and effective devices that we have at our disposal. So what did I do? One of the things I'll do is I'll start out over top of that G chord, all right, by starting out with, and make my way up to that raised 5 over top of the 5 chord. So think G7, but right before the downbeat of the C chord, the 1, I want you to hit the approach tone into the C's 3rd. All right, so that would be, instead of, I want you to think. Okay, and by doing that, you'll be playing this sound. Right, that's the G. So we're going to take the 5th and raise it up 1 tone. Okay, so that would mean over top of that G chord, when we're doing, boom, 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 boom. We want to hear that E flat just before, and that'll help guide you towards the downbeat being on the 3rd of that C. Now, one of the big pitfalls that I see people make when they play over this tune is that they try to assign a specific modality to the C chord. Okay, that means they try to think of it as being C mixolydian or C Ionian or C. Don't do that. Think of it as C major pentatonic flat 3. Okay. That's the sound you want. Oh, sorry. Okay, that kind of thing. Good evening from Amsterdam. I know I just am back from Europe, and that's why I have the jet lag. I woke up this morning, 5 o'clock, started just pounding coffee, and I was like, ugh, what am I going to do? On one of my online, I guess he's not a student yet, but he's kind of buzzing around the hive here talking about maybe coming on board for taking some lessons this fall. Has been asking me some questions about Ophelia and how he incorporated. Yeah, I had a wonderful, San Sebastian is just about the finest place on earth. I just love it there. He's been buzzing around the hive of taking lessons and asking me some questions, on DMs or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the kids are calling the private messaging that takes place, and asking me about Ophelia and utilizing some of my lessons. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll do one of these for him, and just to kind of help not seal the connection between he and I, I assume he's a guy, as far as the teacher-student relationship, but he just seemed like he could use some help. So one of the things that we started out talking about was this relationship between the A7, then to the D7, then to the G7. So let's look at those shapes, okay? Just so everybody can see what's happening here. That's the flat 7 of the A chord, the root, and the third. Okay, then we're going to shift the shape, right, from this pinky middle index shape. We're going to slide back a fret. This becomes the third of our D, and then the index finger stays where it was. Middle finger shifts to the ring finger, and we turn it to this shape. So we can hear up. So A, D, G, C. So working through a 1, 6, 2, 5 in that progression in these voicings is probably one of the most. It's kind of like a tongue twister for your fingers. So if you're thinking C, A7, D, G. Right? So there's C, A, D, G. All right, and that comes in really handy here right at the end of this. So right here. Right. Okay. And making your way through these types of progressions is kind of like the next tier up from competent blues playing. All right. Anybody that can get kind of up on top of a 1, 4, 5 and understand how to imply the changes so that you can hear the changes to your blues playing without actually playing chords, right? Once you can do that, take the leap and learn how to do that first change, right? Right? That sounds like boom, 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 right? So right now we are targeting that C sharp to play into A, D. Now we got to get to F. Okay, so this is how I try to look at playing, is looking for close chord tones, like close proximity to the last sound I'm playing right before the downbeat of the new chord, right? And I look for the closest one to me, and then usually that starts to form patterns, right? I start to figure out, oh, if I do this enough, see how I got up into the third of our E? Now A7 is coming right up. So you're stupid if you don't go. And now we've got a D7. Now watch this. D7, right? Well, why don't we go to the F, right? Because that's out of the F chord and that's out of the F chord, but it sounds like we're still playing over the D7. Yep. And then into F. Into G. There's that augmented fifth sound. Right into the third of our C, and then we start that little descending turnaround. And I hope you guys can see that I'm employing the devices that I showed you in these chord forms. Right? So that would be, you know. Right? So let's take a look at that augmented sound a little bit. One of the things that's cool about the augmented sound that a lot of people don't recognize is its connection to the symmetrical fingerings of its other kind of half, which is the diminished sound. Now, the diminished chord, you may know, is based on stacking minor thirds, right? So if we were to look at, say, this C sharp diminished sound, which in this song actually functions as a nice substitute for the A7 in our 1-6-2-5, right? So that means you could do, instead of going, you could actually go C sharp diminished, and then to D7. So that would sound like. Hear that little. Right there. That's the diminished sound versus. Instead of that, hearing this. Using those flat seconds, okay? That's a really sophisticated sound that sounds a little too jazzy sometimes in this tune. So be careful. Be careful overthinking it, okay? Sometimes you gotta, use information that you store above your shoulders, and sometimes you gotta use the stuff that you keep below the waist, all right? So sometimes it's better to be kind of raw and sexy. That's more emotional sounding to me than like. Right, all that kind of theoretical arpeggiating things that can sometimes sound a little too sophisticated, a little too effete. All right, so just use a little bit of that, okay, from time to time, and that way you sound like you have enough power in your playing, but enough class. Okay, you don't want to sound wimpy because you're utilizing these kind of delicate intellectual concepts over top of a rock song. Okay, so it's a very common, problem. It's a hard word to use when it's aesthetics, so it's kind of hard to be anything other than subjective about it. But I've found that when I play with my super intelligent jazz friends and we go through stuff like that, their head gets in the way of their heart. So don't let that happen if you're following me anyway. that opening progression, man, whew, it'll definitely throw you for a loop. All right. So one of the things you can do is think about the melody, right? Ba, 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 da, ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, da, 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 da. Right, that flat 7 over the, okay, that flat 7 note, that over top of the F is really kind of a killer move. So let's look at that, okay? That's C. C major pentatonic. But instead of using the 2, I'm going to use the flat 3. That's over the E7 chord. Okay. Then bend up into the 5 of the A chord. All right. That's there. D7 right there. And you see how I just used some brain power there to make the little 1-6-2-5 turnaround? That's what I'm talking about, right? So we were using kind of a mix of knuckle dragging and monocle wearing PhD jazz stuff, right? We don't want to have too much of one or too much of the other, all right? So maybe for the second round through, we would emphasize more like the power of... Okay, what was that? All right, that's the 3rd and the 5th of our C chord played back 1 fret and bent up into key. So that's going to be this sound. Okay. So that was pretty simple I mean, this is a nice move. You could play it like this. Right, that's without any bending. Okay, so that's the 3rd and the 5th, and then we're going to the 3rd and the 5th of the E7. And we're just going to bring it up a minor 3rd because there's a symmetry between these notes. This goes from 5, and then if we bring this up to the 5th, the same shape houses the 7th right there. So that's our E5, 3rd, 5th, 5th, 7th. So if it helps for you to see it like that, there it is. Right? That's the whole Mixolydian arpeggio right there. If you wanted to bring in the flat 2 and get that dominant diminished sound, you can do that to have that kind of altered sound over top of that 3 chord. I tend not to do that in this song like I do. I do that all the time in Deal or, Georgia on My Mind or some of these other types of tunes where you have a chance to kind of really stretch out a little bit. So if we're doing that again, you can slide in or bend. All right, that's a technique I really try to encourage students to get under the control. So thinking about they're both bending 1 fret. All right, and then come up into the E, and then fret the actual notes so that they're dead on. Okay, so you get like this questionable, locked, then come up 1, and we're bending up into the 3rd and the 5th of the A chord that we're looking at. Okay, so we're going C, E, A, that's the D, right? 7, and then that's the of Ophelia. Ophelia. You really want to know that little bit, all right? If you don't do that, you're kind of just blowing through changes rather than playing a song, right? What you really want to do is try to harness the power of this melody. I think it's Levon Helm singing, and boy, oh boy, great singer. And so you're a real dummy if you don't lock into what one of the greatest singers, like within this kind of Americana folk thing, does. You're a real turkey. So take the time to actually harness that. Right, and then right, I think it of Ophelia. Boom, da, dun, dun. Tell me, where have you gone? Right. Tell me, where have tell me, where have you gone? You come up with like something that kind of clocks the phrasing of the vocal. Okay. You don't necessarily always have to play the exact notes, but you can kind of take your cues off of the timing of the melody. That's, instead of. What? Right, we want to start thinking about that kind of thing. So, okay, lots of fun ideas. So that's kind of, all there really is to the solo in Ophelia. They don't go over the B section, they don't do that. All right, but dynamite tune. All right, and I'm not the biggest band fan, to tell you the truth. But with Robbie Robertson's passing, obviously, the respect where respect is due. That's a great song, no doubt about it. And there's a bunch of them. But I just never really emotionally connected with that group in the same way that a lot of my cohorts and friends from colleagues and whatnot from within the jam guitar community seem to have. So that's just sort of an anomaly for me, but I don't want you to view it as a slight, all right? That I don't really talk about the band so much because, let's be honest, I tend to like a little bit more aggressive, flashy guitar playing, and there's a lot of really kind of chill, subtle stuff there. So that's all great, but I'm a little bit more, I guess, intense. All right. So other than that, I don't really have too much to share with you guys. I haven't played guitar very much this summer. I've been out of town goofing around with my family, which is wonderful, and I thoroughly encourage anybody who's a hard worker on the instrument to occasionally back off. I think it's super helpful, actually. I mean, granted, your calluses might get a little soft, or depending, mine don't somehow. And your brain might wander a little bit from where you were last at in terms of your studies. But I tend to think that if you keep every day just putting another layer of knowledge on top of stuff, ultimately, you got to take a break so that your brain can organize all that. You're like creating these mineral deposits over and over and over again. And after a while, you got to start to step back from it and reapproach your own playing from a slightly more objective position. And I find that summertime is a really helpful kind of respite from the rest of the year for me, where I'm teaching a lot and playing a lot and practicing a lot and doing everything I can to kind of improve. I might be, maybe a little further down the road than a lot of the people watching this stuff, but in truth, I'm right there with you. All right, I'm just a little further up the road, but we're on the same, kind of journey towards trying to understand the instrument and how to relate to these songs that everybody knows and loves. So that's what little wisdom I've been able to glean from the 4 decades plus of attacking this silly hunk of wood with 6 strings on it. Okay, as it pertains to Ophelia's lead section. Okay, which I know was giving, I guess his name is Mark Sullivan, some fits and starts. So, what's our takeaway really from this thing? Practicing these 2 ideas primarily. Okay, 1, making the change from C pentatonic to E7, right? Instead of right, you don't want to get into that that E minor 7 sound, which would be diatonic. That means right, right. We want to break away from that. We're actually working on getting that third in there, that major third. Okay, so sorry. So over top of the C chord, omit any 7. Don't play a 7. Sorry, you saw me hit a flat 7 in there. That's not good, because ultimately from here, that C7 sound doesn't mate so well with E7, right? You want to have just a wide open, if you're going to do anything, hit a 6, okay? Right? And then that brings us to our next idea, which is the 1-6-2-5, all dominants. Okay, well, again, with the exception of the C. The 1 chord is treated as major pentatonic. But we're going to go A7, D7, and then G7, right? And then maybe at the end of that, you can add in that flat, that sharp 5. So that's, sorry. C, A7, D7, G7, C. Right? So that's C7, sorry, C. That's the augmented 5. Right, that kind of sound. So we're looking for that, and with a little bit of sass in there. You hear me adding those little pinch harmonics, the Trey, and I like to use that. Add a little extra snark to it, a little extra. All right. And that's pretty much all there is to talk about from my perspective. I don't have much more to share. All right. But I do welcome any and all of you to reach out over the internet if you've got a question in real time, and I'm happy to answer it. Or if you're late in coming to this, so let's say you see it on my channel or whatever like that, and you want to ask a question in the comments, that's fine too. I'll make sure to do everything I can to get back to you. And anybody that's interested in trying to take lessons from me, via any of the Zoom or whatever platforms, that's still obviously a possibility. But but not until September, pretty much. I don't have any free time actually this week. I'm basically in and out of the house, a real quick unpacking and then repacking, and then I'm taking off for Labor Day weekend, and then back to school with the boys, and then I'll be back at it I think first or second week of September. All right, so I guess that's it. That's a good solid chunk of information for my Nympho Nation, and I can never think of questions until I rewatch, and then I have a list of them. Well, don't be shy about saying hey after the fact, post facto. Read, I see you there. Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. It's not every day that you're sitting there like, oh, well, I that exposes something I'm curious about talking to you about, and you have it all ready to kind of go in an eloquent way. All right. One of the things that we also want to do is try to think about how to maybe craft the occasional line that tackles some of these more ambitious ideas. And if you can, rather than trying to make them up on the fly, there's absolutely nothing wrong with figuring out some stuff in advance. So let's take a look at how to do like a 1, 6, 2, 5, all dominant turnaround, right? So let's start up here. So that's C. Now we've got C. Now A. Into the third of D. So we're targeting thirds, right? Third. Then from the fifth of the A chord to the third of the A. To the third of the D. So that's third of D to G. So C. Okay, did anybody hear that as being like C, A7, D, G? And that's, honest to God, one of the most effective practicing things you could do is sit around and practice 1, 6, dominant, 2, dominant, 5. Because if you can do that, then you can certainly play diatonic changes, right? That's a non-diatonic 6 and a non-diatonic second, okay? Those are the biggest... Those are the rocks on which many an accomplished rock player, right, like rock and roll guitar player, destroys their own ship, right? That's where most people scuttle their own lines, is not tagging those thirds. So if you want to target major thirds, see how we're hitting that C sharp right on the downbeat of the A chord. So that would be, all right. Okay, so that's D. Okay, there's that third of the A. So getting around, just if you can just be really relentless in your right, like your progress of trying to make that change. C, A, D, G, C, A, D, G, and I'm a third of each of those on the downbeat. And those weak beats, those are the opportunities for you to add chromatic choices, or in the case of my last example, mistakes. It happens all the time, but the trick is don't worry about it. Do not worry about it. If you worry about it, you're not thinking about what you should be thinking about, okay? So. Okay, and just start going until you get bored of making it, and then find another one that causes you some aggravation, master it, move on to the next layer. And those are those layers, those mineral deposits I was talking about. You just stack them up, boom, 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 boom. And then finally you take a little break, and the next thing you know, one of them starts to commingle with another. This idea of kind of between the D, G, and B set, right? That's A to C, C to A to D to G, right? So. So pretty soon you start to commingle. Right, that kind of thing where you're going C. Yep. Okay. And just because I know what I'm supposed to be doing doesn't mean I do it properly all the time. I find this kind of stuff to be vexing as well. So take care and know that, just because you're making maybe more mistakes than I am at this point, that's not to say that it wasn't the case where I was just the most amazing clam digger on earth. All I did was hit shitty clammy notes for a long time. All right. So once again, I guess I'm going to say, hang in there, folks. Okay, it's a long journey. It's a lot of hours spent, sitting down here and trying to do what we came to do. Let's get rid of this stupid thing. But bottom line, is better than almost anything else I've ever found for keeping my head on straight and not getting all grumpy with the universe. I love playing the guitar and I love teaching it to you guys. So if you're enjoying what you're finding here, please tune in, look around on my little channel there. There's a lot of lessons and things like that. And if you're interested in kind of, taking your playing to the next level and you want to reach out to me privately, feel free to, ask about private tutelage and instruction and stuff like that. In person is cool, but most of my people that are watching this are, going to go for the online lessons and stuff like that. All right. And I'm happy to discuss any and all of that with you whenever you want. Okay. Until then, I will be signing off and going upstairs and having some breakfast and saying hello to the remaining members of my family. The rest of them have gone off to, believe it or not, I have a child who's going to college next year. Oh my God, it's official. I'm old. All right. But I am happy to be home and happy to be back at this because it's been 3.5 weeks of no guitar pretty much. So I will check in with you soon. All right. You take care and cheers from Brooklyn. All right. Adios. How do I turn this thing off? There it is.